The energy bolt tore through General Linda Martinez's shoulder, spinning her backward onto the marble floor of the negotiation chamber. Blood pooled beneath her as the Vakrian ambassador lowered his weapon, his 4 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The peace summit had lasted exactly 47 minutes. Commander Greg Hansen moved faster than his bulk suggested possible. His sidearm cleared its holster while his body positioned itself between the general and the 8-foot-tall reptilian diplomat. The other human delegates were already drawing weapons, their chairs clattering across the floor. The Vakrian honor guard raised their pulse rifles in response. "Stand down," Linda gasped, her good hand pressing against the wound. "Everyone stand down." The Terran soldiers hesitated, fingers tight on triggers. The room crackled with tension, the air itself seeming to vibrate with potential violence. 900 years of peace hung by a thread. You dare give orders while bleeding on our floor? The Vakrian ambassador's translator rendered his words with mechanical precision. Your kind should have stayed in your little corner of space. This treaty was always temporary, a mistake our ancestors made that we now correct. Linda forced herself to her knees, then to her feet. The pain was incredible, but she had endured worse during the border wars of her youth. Greg stepped closer, ready to catch her if she fell. She waved him back with a slight gesture. "The treaty holds," she said, her voice steady despite the blood running down her arm. "This was an act of one individual, not your government." The ambassador's laugh was a wet hissing sound. "My government? I am the Emperor's third son. I speak with his voice." And his message is clear. Humanity's time of protection has ended. The Empire expands once more, and your worlds lie directly in our path. Linda's vision swam, but she kept her gaze locked on the alien's face. Behind him, through the chamber's vast windows, she could see the orbital station circling the neutral moon. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species floated in carefully maintained distances, all there to witness this historic renegotiation of the ancient accords. "Then you have made a grave error," Linda said quietly, "not in shooting me, but in assuming we needed your protection in the first place." The ambassador tilted his head, a gesture of confusion among his species. "You misunderstand your position, human. We have 6,000 warships in this sector alone. Your entire fleet numbers perhaps 300 vessels. You are outnumbered 20 to 1. Greg's hand moved to his communicator, but Linda shook her head. Not yet. She needed the ambassador to understand, needed him to carry this message back to his emperor and his council of warlords. 900 years ago, she said, taking a step forward despite the blood loss, your ancestors signed that treaty for a reason. They had just witnessed what humans do when backed into corners. What we're capable of when survival is the only option left. The ambassador's weapon rose again. Ancient history. Your military records from that era are sealed. No one remembers what humans did to earn their protection, but myths and legends won't save you from modern plasma cannons. Linda smiled, and even the Vakrian guards shifted uncomfortably at the expression. It was the smile of someone who knew a terrible secret. "Then let me remind you," she said and nodded to Greg. The commander activated his communicator. Authorization Martinez 77 Alpha. Unseal the archives, all of them. Broadcast to every species in this system. The ambassador's eyes widened as data began flooding every screen in the chamber. Images of burning worlds, videos of human soldiers doing impossible things, records of weapons that violated every known law of civilized warfare. The true history of humanity's last war, the one that had earned them 9 centuries of peace through sheer documented horror. "You wanted the treaty ended," Linda said softly. "Congratulations, now you'll learn why it existed." The energy bolt had been meant to start a war. Instead, it had released something far worse, humanity unchained. Greg caught Linda as she finally collapsed, but her eyes remained open, watching the ambassador's face drain of color as the records continued to play. The chamber doors burst open as medical teams rushed in, but Linda barely noticed. She was already calculating fleet movements, weapon deployments, and casualty estimates. The 900-year peace was over. The Vakrian Empire had just reminded humanity what it felt like to be threatened. Now humanity would remind the galaxy what it meant to threaten them. In orbit above, the first human warships began arriving through jump gates, their hulls bearing insignias that hadn't been displayed in 9 centuries. The crews inside them were descendants of the soldiers who had fought the last war, raised on stories of what their ancestors had done, trained for a conflict they never believed would come. But it had come, and this time there would be no treaty at the end. The medical team lifted Linda onto a stretcher, but she kept her eyes on the ambassador. He was still watching the screens, his weapon forgotten in his hand, his confident posture replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Good, Linda thought as darkness finally claimed her. Let him be afraid, because humanity was about to show the galaxy why fear was the most rational response. The peace had lasted 900 years. The war that followed would be measured in weeks. Commander Greg Hansen stood over the unconscious general, his face carved from stone, his hand still on his sidearm. Around him, the other human delegates had formed a protective circle, their weapons drawn, their expressions identical to his own. The Vakrian ambassador finally found his voice. This is madness. You cannot hope to win. Greg's smile matched the one Linda had worn moments before. We don't need to hope, he said. We just need to remember. And in the depths of space, hidden shipyards that hadn't operated in centuries suddenly blazed with light as ancient engines awakened, ready to build the weapons that had once made the galaxy tremble. The timer had started. The Vakrian Empire had days, perhaps hours, before they understood the magnitude of their mistake. But by then, it would be far too late to take back a single energy bolt fired in arrogance. The woman general had been shot. The peace treaty had ended. Now humanity would remind the universe why the treaty had been necessary in the first place. Part 2 begins with the data still flooding every screen in the negotiation chamber. The historical archives revealed footage that made even hardened warriors turn away. The First Contact War, as humanity had named it, had lasted only 3 years. But those 3 years had reshaped an entire region of the galaxy. The recordings showed human ships ramming into enemy dreadnoughts at relativistic speeds, turning both vessels into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. They showed soldiers in primitive armor boarding alien stations and clearing them room by room with a methodical brutality that modern militaries had deemed too excessive to teach. The Vakrian ambassador, whose name was Skrax, stumbled backward as one particular recording played. It showed a human colony under siege, outnumbered 50-1, with no hope of rescue. The defenders had activated their fusion reactors' emergency protocols, overloading them deliberately. When the attacking fleet moved in for the final assault, the entire moon had detonated with the force of a small star. 300,000 humans had died in that explosion. They had taken 17 million enemy soldiers with them. "Turn it off," Skrax whispered, but the recordings continued. His honor guard stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their training forgotten in the face of such documented insanity. Greg Hansen watched the aliens' reaction with cold satisfaction. The medical team had rushed General Martinez to the human diplomatic ship docked at the station, but they had left him in command of the delegation. His orders were simple. Make them understand, make them regret. "This is just the first year of the war," Greg said conversationally, gesturing at the screens. "Would you like to see what we developed in year 2? After we realized conventional warfare wasn't enough." Skrax's translator struggled with the choking sound that emerged from his throat. Around the chamber, representatives from other species had arrived, drawn by emergency alerts and diplomatic protocols. They stood in the doorways, watching the screens with expressions ranging from horror to calculation. The Matherian Trade Confederation, the Silicon Collective, the Preservation Alliance. Every major power in this sector of space had sent observers to the Peace Summit. Now they were all watching humanity's secret history. Greg keyed his communicator again. "Skip to the Battle of Proxima Station." The boarding action. The screen shifted. New footage appeared, grainier than the previous recordings, but no less clear. It showed human soldiers in bulky combat suits moving through a space station's corridors. The aliens defending the station outnumbered them 3-1 and had superior positions. The humans didn't slow down. They moved forward through plasma fire and explosive decompression, through chemical weapons and energy barriers, never stopping, never retreating. When their ammunition ran out, they used blades. When their blades broke, they used their hands. One soldier, her nameplate reading Chen, had lost her entire right arm to a plasma burst. The recording showed her picking up a fallen enemy weapon with her left hand and continuing forward, her suit's medical systems pumping her full of stimulants to keep her conscious. Despite massive blood loss, she cleared 3 more rooms before the stimulants failed, and she collapsed. The mission logs indicated she survived, received a mechanical replacement, and returned to combat 6 weeks later. "This is barbarism," a Matherian observer said from the doorway, his voice filters making the words sound tinny. "This violates every convention of civilized warfare." Greg turned to face him, and the Matherian actually stepped back at the expression on the human's face. "We didn't start that war. Greg said quietly. The Kresh Empire did. They thought humans were easy prey. Soft. Weak. They attacked our colonies without warning, without declaration, without mercy. They killed billions of civilians in the first month. He gestured at the screens. What you're watching is what happened when we stopped trying to fight like civilized species and started fighting to survive. The Kresh Empire had ruled this sector for 10,000 years. They had technology we couldn't match, numbers we couldn't overcome, and experience we couldn't counter. The recordings continued. They showed human engineers developing weapons that made other species' military advisors weep. Kinetic missiles launched at 90 to 8% of light speed. Biological agents designed to target specific genetic markers. Nanoweapons that could disassemble enemy ships at the molecular level. And worse things, terrible things, weapons that the human military had classified and sealed away after the war ended. We won that war, Greg continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. Not because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. We won because we were willing to do anything, sacrifice anything, become anything necessary to ensure our species survived. The Kresh Empire numbered in the trillions. We reduced them to scattered refugee populations in 3 years. Skrax had fallen to his knees, his weapon clattering to the floor. His honor guard made no move to help him. They were too busy watching the screens, watching humans do things that should have been impossible. The treaty, Skrax managed to say, the peace treaty. Your leaders signed it. They agreed to restrictions on your military, to limitations on your weapons development, to oversight by the Galactic Council. Greg nodded slowly. We did. Because after the war ended, our leaders looked at what we had become and were horrified. The things we had done, the weapons we had built, the lines we had crossed. We didn't want to be that species anymore. We wanted to be better, so we agreed to the treaty. We sealed the archives. We limited ourselves. We spent 900 years trying to forget what we were capable of. He walked closer to the kneeling ambassador, his boots echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. But we never forgot completely. We kept the records. We maintained the shipyards hidden and dormant. We trained every generation's military on the basics just in case. Just in case someone, someday, decided that humanity's time of protection should end. The screens shifted again, this time showing current footage. Human warships emerging from jump gates. Not 300 vessels, thousands. Ships that had been in mothballs and hidden facilities, now crewed and armed and moving with purpose. The secret was out. The restrictions were lifted. And humanity's true military capacity was on full display for the first time in 9 centuries. You shot General Martinez, Greg said softly. You violated the treaty. You declared through your actions and your words that the peace was over. So now it's over. And now you get to see what humanity does when we're not restricted by treaties or oversight or the desire to be civilized. Skrack looked up at him, his 4 eyes wide with understanding and terror. But we didn't know. The records were sealed. The history was hidden. We thought the treaty was because you were weak, because you needed protection. You thought wrong. The Mytharian observer stepped forward, his diplomatic training overriding his obvious fear. This is insanity. Even with these weapons, you cannot hope to defeat the entire Vakrian Empire. They control 1,000 systems. They have resources beyond measure. Greg's smile was cold. The Kresh Empire controlled 3,000 systems. They had resources beyond imagination. It didn't save them. He turned to address all the observers, all the representatives of species who had come to witness a peaceful renegotiation, and instead found themselves watching the death of an era. We genuinely wanted it. For 19 years, we've been your neighbors, your trading partners, your friends. We've shared technology and culture and art. We've been the species you barely thought about, quiet and compliant and unremarkable. But we were never weak. We were restrained. There's a difference. And Ambassador Skrax just removed those restraints. The screens showed more ships arriving, shown construction facilities activating, show weapons platforms coming online. The hidden infrastructure of a species that had prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. General Martinez will survive, Greg continued. Our medical technology is quite advanced, though we haven't shared the details with the galactic community. When she wakes, she'll take command of the fleet that's currently assembling. She'll be the one who plans the response to this unprovoked attack. And I promise you her response will be measured and appropriate. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. Measured by human standards. Appropriate by human definitions, not by yours. Skrax struggled to his feet, his honor guard finally moving to support him. I will return to my empire. I will tell them what I've seen. Perhaps there is still time to prevent this war. Perhaps, Greg agreed, but that depends entirely on what your emperor decides when he hears your report. If he chooses wisdom, if he disavows your actions and offers appropriate compensation, then perhaps the war can be contained. Limited. Controlled. The ambassador's relief was visible, his posture straightening slightly. But if he chooses pride, Greg continued, and his voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. If he decides that humanity still needs to be taught its place, if he sends his fleets against our worlds thinking that numbers and technology will be enough, then what you've seen in these archives will seem gentle by comparison. He gestured at the screens one final time. We've had 900 years to think about the last war, to analyze our mistakes, to develop better weapons, better tactics, better strategies. We've had 900 years to imagine what we would do differently if we ever had to fight again. And we've had 900 years to become very, very good at the art of controlled violence. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. The observers looked at each other, at the humans, at the screen still displaying humanity's dark history. Calculations were being made. Alliances reconsidered. Treaties evaluated. You're dismissed, Ambassador Strax, Greg said formally. Return to your emperor. Deliver your message. And pray that he's wiser than you were today. The Vakrian delegation left, their movements hasty and uncoordinated, so different from the arrogant precision they had displayed upon arrival. The honor guard practically carried their ambassador, his legs seemingly unable to support his weight. When they were gone, the Matherian observer approached Greg carefully. Commander Hansen, my government will want to know, if war comes, where will the Matherian Confederation stand? Greg looked at him steadily. That's your decision to make. We've never asked for alliances or support. We've always maintained that humanity's conflicts are humanity's responsibility. That hasn't changed. But if we were to offer support, to stand with humanity against the Vakrian Empire, then we would accept it gratefully and remember it always. Humanity values its friends. Greg's expression softened slightly. But we won't ask. We won't demand. That's not who we are. Even now, even with the restrictions lifted. The observer nodded slowly. I will relay this to my government. But Commander, I must ask, is it true? The things shown in those archives, the weapons, the tactics, the casualties, every recording is verified and authenticated. We didn't fabricate anything, we didn't exaggerate. If anything, we left out the worst parts. Greg's face showed genuine regret. The First Contact War was the darkest period in human history. We're not proud of what we did, but we're not ashamed of surviving. Other observers began to leave, returning to their ships to file reports and seek instructions. Within hours, the entire galaxy would know that humanity's peaceful facade had been exactly that. A facade. The real question was what they would do with that knowledge. Greg stood alone in the chamber finally, the screen still playing their terrible history. He thought about General Martinez, currently in surgery aboard the diplomatic vessel. He thought about the fleet assembling in nearby systems. He thought about his wife and children on Earth, safe for now but potentially in danger if this war escalated. Mostly, he thought about the next few days and what they would bring. The Vakrian Empire would respond. They would either back down or double down. And Greg knew which option was more likely. Pride was a universal constant, even across species lines. His communicator buzzed. Hansen here. Commander, this is Captain Lisa Grant aboard the diplomatic vessel. General Martinez is out of surgery. The doctors say she'll make a full recovery. She's asking for you. I'm on my way. Greg took one last look at the screens, at the images of a humanity that had been pushed too far and pushed back with overwhelming force. Then he turned them off, plunging the chamber into darkness except for the starlight streaming through the windows. The past was done, the present was in motion, and the future would be written in the next few hours by decisions made in throne rooms and command centers across 1,000 worlds. He left the chamber and headed for the docking bay, already composing his report to Earth Central Command. The 900-year peace was officially over. What came next would depend on wisdom, restraint, and the willingness of old empires to learn new lessons. But Greg wasn't optimistic. In his experience, empires rarely learned until it was too late, and humanity had become very, very good at teaching through demonstration. Part 3 begins in the medical bay of the diplomatic vessel Starlight, where General Linda Martinez lay in a recovery bed, her shoulder wrapped in regenerative bandages that glowed faintly blue. Commander Greg Hansen stood at attention beside her bed. along with Captain Lisa Grant and the ship's chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Pierce. "At ease, Commander," Linda said, her voice stronger than Greg had expected. "Give me the full report. No sugarcoating." Greg relaxed fractionally. The Vacrian delegation departed 1 hour ago. Ambassador Scrax was notably shaken by the archival footage. The other species observers are currently filing emergency reports to their governments. Conservative estimates suggest the entire galactic community will know about the unsealed archives within 6 hours, currently at 42% of full mobilization. Admiral Kyle Morrison is overseeing the activation of mothballed vessels at the Titan yards. "We're bringing online approximately 1,500 warships that have been in storage, plus another 800 from active reserves. The hidden construction facilities at Europa, Ganymede, and Enceladus are operational and producing new vessels at emergency rates." Linda nodded, then winced as the movement pulled at her shoulder. Dr. Pierce frowned but said nothing. "What about the Vacrian Empire's response? Their fleet movements suggest they're taking the threat seriously. They've begun repositioning forces along our mutual border. Signal intelligence indicates significant communication traffic between their sector commands and their home world. We're intercepting encrypted messages, but our linguists are working on translation. Estimated time until their emperor makes a decision?" Greg consulted his datapad. "Intelligence estimates 48 to 72 hours. The Vacrian government operates on consensus among the royal family. Scrack is the third son, so his voice carries weight. But the emperor will consult with his other children and his military advisors before committing to a course of action, 2 to 3 days. Linda closed her eyes, calculating. "How many civilians can we evacuate from our border colonies in that time frame?" Captain Grant stepped forward. "General, with respect, evacuating border colonies would signal weakness. It would suggest we're preparing for defeat. I'm preparing for reality, Captain. If this turns into a full-scale war, those colonies are going to be primary target. I won't sacrifice civilians to maintain an image of strength." Linda opened her eyes and her gaze was steel. "How many, Commander?" "Approximately 40% if we repurpose commercial vessels and prioritize children and non-combatants. The rest would need to shelter in place using the underground facilities we've been maintaining since the last war. Make it happen. Voluntary evacuation only, but strongly encouraged. I want transports moving within 12 hours. Greg made notes on his pad. "Yes, General. What about our offensive capabilities?" Linda was quiet for a moment, her eyes focused on something beyond the medical bay's walls. "We're not starting this war, Greg. If it comes because the Vacrian Empire chooses it. But we need to be ready to end it quickly and decisively if they do. The archives have been unsealed. The galaxy knows what we're capable of. Isn't that deterrent enough?" Knowing and believing are different things. The Kresh Empire knew we were dangerous after the first 6 months of combat. They kept fighting for another 2.5 years because they couldn't believe that we would actually use the weapons we were developing. Pride and disbelief are a deadly combination. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat. "General, I must insist that you rest. Your body has suffered significant trauma, and while the regenerative systems are accelerating your healing, you still need time to recover fully. How long until I can return to active duty? At least 72 hours for the shoulder to heal sufficiently. Longer if you want full combat capability. I want to be operational in 48 hours, Doctor. Do whatever you need to do to make that happen, without compromising my long-term health." Pierce looked unhappy but nodded. "I'll adjust the treatment protocol. But General, pushing too hard could result in permanent damage." "Noted. Commander Hansen, I'm placing you in tactical command until I'm cleared for duty. Work with Admiral Morrison on fleet positioning. I want our forces ready to respond to any Vacrian aggression, but I don't want us looking like we're preparing a first strike. Defensive posture, strong deterrent, clear communication that we're responding to their actions, not initiating conflict." "Understood. What about our allies? Several species have reached out through back channels asking about our intentions." Linda considered this carefully. "Be honest with them, we didn't want this war. We spent 900 years avoiding it. But we won't back down from it either. Any species that wants to stand with us will be welcomed. Any species that wants to remain neutral will be respected. But any species that sides with the Vacrian Empire will be considered hostile." "That's a hard line, General. These are hard times. The galaxy is about to relearn something it forgot 9 centuries ago. Humanity doesn't do half measures. We tried peace, genuinely and completely. If we have to do war, we'll commit to it just as fully." Captain Grant spoke up again. General, I've been reviewing the unsealed archives. Some of the weapon systems shown in those records, they're beyond anything currently in our active arsenal. Are we actually maintaining those capabilities? Linda met her gaze steadily. Some of them. The ones that don't violate fundamental ethics or risk uncontrollable consequences. Others were dismantled and will stay that way. We are not monsters, Captain. We're humans defending our species' right to exist. But the relativistic kinetic weapons, the molecular disassemblers, the genetic targeting systems, are all available if needed. But they're last resort options, not first-strike weapons. Our current doctrine emphasizes conventional superiority and tactical precision. We only escalate to the truly terrible weapons if the enemy forces us to. Greg's communicator buzzed. He checked it quickly. General, incoming message from Earth Central Command. Admiral Morrison wants to brief you on the fleet disposition as soon as you're available. Tell him 10 minutes. I need to get out of this bed. Linda started to sit up, ignoring Dr. Pierce's protest. General Martinez, you are not medically cleared. Doctor, I appreciate your concern for my health. But right now, the health of billions of humans across dozens of worlds depends on me doing my job. Help me up, Pierce sighed but assisted her, supporting her weight as she swung her legs off the bed. Her face went pale and Greg moved to help, but she waved him back. I can manage. Just need a moment for the pain suppressants to kick in. Once she was steady, she looked at the 3 officers around her. This is what I need from each of you. Commander Hansen, coordinate with Morrison and get our fleet positioned optimally. Captain Grant, I want continuous monitoring of all Vakrian communications and movements. Any change in their posture, I want to know immediately. Dr. Pierce, I need combat stimulants and pain management that will keep me functional for the next 72 hours without impairing my judgment. General, that's a dangerous combination. Everything about this situation is dangerous, Doctor. Do your best. She took a few careful steps, testing her balance. The regenerative bandages covered most of her shoulder and upper chest, their blue glow visible through her medical gown. Someone get me a uniform. I'm not conducting a war council in hospital clothes. 10 minutes later, Linda Martinez stood in the diplomatic vessel's command center, fully dressed in her general's uniform. The shoulder seemed carefully adjusted to accommodate the bandages. Admiral Morrison's face filled the main view screen, his expression grim. General, good to see you on your feet. How's the shoulder? Functional. Report, Admiral. Morrison gestured, and tactical displays replaced his face on the screen. We've achieved 45% mobilization, ahead of schedule. The Titan yards are working triple shifts. We're also seeing volunteers coming out of retirement, former military personnel requesting reactivation. Apparently, word of your shooting has spread through the veteran community, and they're not happy. Linda studied the displays, noting ship positions and defensive formations. Fleet strength? Currently, 200 warships of various classes, ranging from light cruisers to heavy dreadnoughts. We expect to reach 3,000 within 48 hours. After that, we'll be limited by crew availability rather than ship production. What about the special weapons platforms? Morrison's expression darkened. The Genesis stations are operational, all 12 of them positioned in deep space along potential invasion routes. They're armed with the full spectrum of deterrent weapons, including the ones we hoped never to use again. Linda nodded slowly. The Genesis stations were humanity's ultimate defensive measure. Massive orbital fortresses equipped with weapons that could sterilize entire solar systems if necessary. They had been built during the First Contact War and mothballed after the peace treaty. Now they were active again, silent sentinels ready to unleash apocalyptic force if required. Keep them on standby but inactive. I don't want to give the Vakrians any excuse to claim we're preparing a first strike. Understood. What about rules of engagement? Standard defensive protocols. If Vakrian forces cross into human space with hostile intent, we engage with proportional force. We target military assets only, no civilian casualties if avoidable. We fight clean until and unless they demonstrate they won't. And if they use weapons of mass destruction? Linda's voice went cold. Then we respond in kind, but with precision. We're better at this than they are, Admiral. We've had 900 years to perfect the art of controlled escalation. If they want to play that game, they'll lose, but we don't start it. Morrison nodded. I'll update the fleet commanders. General, I should mention that morale is extremely high. The troops are angry about your shooting, and they're ready to fight. Channel that anger into discipline, Admiral. Angry soldiers make mistakes, disciplined soldiers win wars. I want every commander to emphasize that we're professionals, not a mob. We fight smart, not hard. Yes, General. One more thing. I want a communication prepared for broadcast to all Vakrian forces. Make it clear that we're responding to their ambassador's actions, not attacking unprovoked. Give them a chance to stand down. Emphasize that we seek justice for the treaty violation, not genocide. Make it clear we can be reasonable. You think they'll listen? Probably not. But I want the historical record to show we tried. When this is over, I want the galaxy to remember that humanity offered peace right up until the moment we were forced to fight. Morrison's image nodded grimly. I'll have the communication drafted within the hour. Anything else? Yes. Begin contingency planning for deep strike operations. If this war starts, I don't want to fight it defensively. We need options for taking the fight to their territory, disrupting their supply lines, forcing them to defend their own worlds instead of attacking ours. That's aggressive, General. That's realistic. The best defense has always been a strong offense. We learned that lesson 900 years ago. I'd rather not have to teach it again, but if necessary, we will. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering logistics, intelligence assessments, and diplomatic communications. By the end, Linda felt the pain suppressants wearing off, the throbbing in her shoulder becoming more pronounced. But she kept her expression neutral, her voice steady. When the communication finally ended, she allowed herself to sag slightly against the command console. Greg was there immediately, supporting her weight. General, you should rest. Soon. First, I need to record a message to Earth. The people need to hear from me directly. General, that's not a request, Commander. Get me a communication link to Earth Central Broadcasting. 5-minute delay for security protocol. I want every human in known space to hear this message simultaneously. Greg hesitated, then nodded. Yes, General. 15 minutes to establish the link. Linda used those 15 minutes to compose her thoughts, to decide what needed to be said and what needed to remain unspoken. The galaxy was watching humanity now, judging, calculating. The next few hours would determine whether the Vakrian Empire backed down or doubled down, and if they chose war, Linda needed humanity united and ready. When the communication link was established, she stood before the camera, her injured shoulder hidden by the angle, her expression calm and controlled. The red light activated, indicating she was broadcasting to billions of humans across dozens of worlds. This is General Linda Martinez. By now, you've all heard about the incident at the Peace Summit. You've seen the unsealed archives. You've learned truths about our history that have been hidden for 900 years. I'm here to tell you what happens next. She paused, choosing her words with care. We are not at war. Not yet. But we are prepared for that possibility. The Vakrian Empire violated a treaty that has kept the peace for 9 centuries. They did so deliberately, arrogantly, and without regard for the consequences. Now they will learn what those consequences are. Her voice strengthened. Humanity sought peace. We genuinely wanted it. For 900 years, we've been good neighbors, honest traders, faithful friends. We've shared our culture, our art, our technology. We've built a civilization based on cooperation and mutual respect. That hasn't changed. But we will not accept subjugation. We will not bow to threats. We will not allow our species to be treated as inferior or expendable. If the Vakrian Empire chooses war, we will fight. And we will win. She let that statement hang in the air for a moment. You've seen the archives. You know what our ancestors were capable of when survival was at stake. We are their descendants. We carry their strength, their determination, their absolute refusal to accept defeat. If we must fight, we will fight with every resource at our disposal. We will be professional. We will be ethical. We will be restrained. But we will also be victorious. To the Vakrian Empire, I say this. Stand down. Disavow your ambassador's actions. Offer appropriate compensation for this treaty violation. There is still time to prevent this war. But that time is measured in hours, not days. Choose wisely. She straightened her eyes, boring into the camera. To humanity, I say this. Prepare yourselves. Follow evacuation orders if they come. Trust in your military and your government. We have spent 9 centuries preparing for this possibility, hoping it would never come. Now that it has, we will handle it with the professionalism and competence you expect from us. We will protect you. We will defend our worlds. We will ensure that humanity's future remains bright and free. The peace has ended, but our resolve has not. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters, every threat this universe has thrown at us. We will survive this too, and when we do, the galaxy will remember why the peace treaty existed in the first place. She saluted, a crisp military gesture. Martinez out. The red light deactivated. Linda allowed herself to slump, the pain in her shoulder becoming overwhelming. Greg and Dr. Pierce were there immediately, supporting her as she swayed. "Back to Medical Bay," Pierce insisted. "No arguments this time, General." Linda didn't argue. She had done what needed to be done. The message was sent, the die was cast. Now they would wait for the Vacrian Empire's response and prepare for whatever came next. As they helped her back to the Medical Bay, she thought about the footage in the archives, the terrible things humans had done in the name of survival. She thought about the weapons waiting in hidden facilities, the soldiers training for combat they had hoped never to see, the civilians evacuating,